I'd like to call the order of the Pleasant Grove City Council work session on this September the 7th, 2021. And welcome, we have all council members here present, accounted for, and a lot of staff that has joined us out there this evening, and welcome you all. Doesn't look like we have any of the public who've joined us this evening. So we'll start our first item of business on a work session with our high-level debrief of the water boil order. We'll turn the time to our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to run through the council. Council was kept up to date on a regular basis during the whole boil order situation. So what I'm going to talk about for you will be pretty much a rehash. I think for the public, though, that is listening in, this will kind of walk through what a standard deal is for this for a city as you go through a boil order. Obviously, we had one last year. This was in a different zone, so these incidents were not related. And this one took place in our Battle Creek zone, and it started on Monday when we did our normal sampling that we do. We do 40 sample tests, 20 in each zone in our city on a monthly basis. So we don't do all those tests necessarily in one day, but we are required by EPA guidelines to do this. The state of Utah requires us to do this. Through our standard testing, we found out on Tuesday that we had a home that we normally test came back coliform positive. So when that happens, the lab that we send our testing to, they proceed further to see if it is E. coli positive, which takes another day, another 24 hours to turn that around. So on Tuesday, we knew we had a coliform positive test, but we did not know whether it was E. coli or not. Once that test comes back coliform positive, then the standard procedure is to test the home upstream and downstream from that home. And then also, we just chose on our own to do a home across the street just to kind of see where that was at. So those tests were taken on Tuesday and submitted. On Wednesday, the initial house that we got the coliform positive test on Monday, on Tuesday, came back E. coli positive on Wednesday. So once we get the E. coli positive test, that sends it into a position now where we need to notify the state, we need to notify the public, and make sure that we follow certain protocols at that point. So we found that out at about 11 o'clock, and then Public Works went into action, starting to flush the system, trying to look at potential cross connections, trying to see if we could find a source. On the city's end, we started a preparation. We knew from experience this was likely going to trigger a boil order. So Marty eventually talked to the state that afternoon, in which they informed us we'll need to do the boil order. Now, we were successful again this year in the fact that our systems are separate. They're separated. We do have a valve that allows the cross connection between the two systems. But we keep that valve shut on a fairly regular, we keep it shut, generally speaking, all the time. And so because of that, we were able to keep a portion of our city free from the boil order, which contained almost all of our commercial businesses. It was the opposite a year ago. It was that part of town that had to go on boil order, while the other part of town, mostly residential, did not require that. So that was beneficial to us, because the initial discussion was the whole city would go on boil order, but after they looked at the information we had, they decided that we were okay to do that. So we started putting together the materials. We write up the boil order. We started putting together the materials to inform the public, which included our Everbridge reverse 911. We also have phone numbers that we can send a text to everybody that we have a phone number for on our utility accounts. And then we have our standard social media, which is Facebook, Twitter, and Constant Contact. Constant Contact is people that have given us their email address, and we can send them emails. a key thing happened that afternoon. Kyler said, hey, there's a way to create an interactive map that when this becomes public, then people will be able to access this map, and then they can zoom in and see whether they're in the boil order area or not. So when we did this last year, we didn't have the interactive map. We just had a static map that had some boundaries on it that showed this is the zones, and for some people, they didn't know whether their house was in the zone or not, created some confusion. So this interactive map was a key component in helping people understand whether they were in the boil order zone or not. And that took a little bit to get that. He had to get all the files from JUB, and then we got everything situated. Meantime, Tina had written up the boil order, and we had written up our press release. The state had to approve the boil order, so they approved that. And then once we had everybody in place, we had employees that we asked to stay past hours because we knew once this went out, we were going to get a ton of phone calls. And so we routed everybody into Public Works, all the phone calls into Public Works that evening, and we went public with it at about 5:30. So normally, when we have an E. coli positive test, the state requires that we have 24 hours to disclose that. We turned it around in about 6.5 hours, which we feel pretty good about as far as the timeliness of how quickly we could do that. One of the questions we get is, why don't we just inform the public right away once we get an E. coli positive test? Well, probably the main reason is if we did that, then all of a sudden we would get a zillion questions and we wouldn't have answers. So we have to take a moment to make sure everything's situated on our end in order for that to happen, which is what we did. I also got a hold of the school district and the charter schools that were in the Boyle area, just letting them know that this was happening because by this time it's getting late in the afternoon and they had time to prepare for the next day. In the meantime, we had a local company. Is it Enevive? How do I say it? Enevive? They're a water filtering company. Once the boil order went out, they texted, I believe, Diana and said, hey.
I actually ran down there.
Okay.
I know this is a service that you guys offer.
Yeah. So this was a service they've always offered, and this was just an opportunity for them to say, hey, if you, any size container, you bring it down, we'll give you filtered water. And so we put that out publicly on our Facebook page, and that was really a big help. I think they had a steady stream of people over the next few days. And so we knew that our residents had a place to turn. Now, the water, in order to be consumed, just had to be boiled. So people had access to water if they boiled it. But for some, I mean, they went and bought bottled water. I think most of the places got cleared out within about a 20-mile radius of Pleasant Grove. But the fact that this was available, we always had a place to push people when they would call and say, I can't get my, because we just tell them, boil your water and it's okay. But for some, even that made them uncomfortable. So we had that resource. So on Thursday, we get back the test results from Tuesday that we took, which were the other 3 homes, the other 2 homes upstream, downstream, and the other home, and plus the original home, they all test positive for E. coli. And so we decided to extend the testing on Thursday to do a couple more homes a couple blocks away. And in the meantime, we recognized that our chlorine, let me take a step back. Wednesday night was a lot of research, really trying to figure out what the source of this thing was. We were looking at chlorine residuals in our culinary water. And so we had, a ton of employees out there doing these chlorine residuals into the night. I think they were out till about midnight. Again, trying to find if there was a pattern or a way that we could figure out where the source of this was coming from. So on Thursday, it was decided that we do have this valve that takes water from upper zone, so still in the Battle Creek zone. This water has more chlorine residual than the water just below it. So we open up this valve to get the water in there. The valve malfunctions. They go to close it, and it blows up our water line. So now the guys have to fix a water line leak, which takes a few hours. But once the water line was fixed, the leak was fixed, then we were able to flush out the system. And get some good water in there and take another round of tests. So that was on Thursday night. Before we did that, we did take some tests earlier that morning. Those were the ones that we took a couple blocks away. So Friday, this is all, it sounds a little convoluted, and it's just kind of crazy how this timeline works, but I tried to articulate the best that I could as we went through this. But on Friday, the samples that we collected Thursday morning, within a couple blocks of the original 4 homes, come back E. coli positive. So those were the ones that we had taken before we had fully flushed the system. So that didn't surprise us when those came back E. coli positive, because at that time, we hadn't done the full flushing and the chlorination. So in the meantime, we did the full flushing and chlorination, and then we took tests that evening. And we took those tests, we did a side-by-side, so we took some to Richard's lab and some to Chemtech lab. Chemtech can turn around an E. coli test in 18 hours. Richard's takes really 48 hours to turn around an E. coli test. So we needed, and this is one of the frustrating parts about a process like this, is by the time we get near the end of this, we're just sitting and waiting for test results to come in, because we've done what we feel about everything we can to mitigate the situation, but until we can get test results to reflect what we need them to reflect, we can't release the boil order. The Friday, we do extensive flushing in the entire zone and retest the initial 4 homes, plus numerous other tests in the zone. So we looked at this and said, okay, we wanted to make sure, okay, something that's 5 blocks away or 10 blocks away, or maybe even on the other side of town in the same zone, let's test those again just to make sure. And so what we did 26 tests on Friday to really get an overall view of the whole zone, but specifically, most of the tests were kind of in this same area where we had the initial problem. Saturday, we had a potential source of cross-contamination that we investigated, found out that was not the cause. There was proper check valves in the system, and so there was not secondary water getting back into the culinary system. And Saturday, all 26 tests that we took came back clean, including the Gibson well. So the Gibson well, before that had tested, on Friday, had tested positive for coliform. And so it came back clean on Saturday, and we thought, okay, whatever the source was, it's been flushed out through the system. We're good to go. Things are fine. On Sunday, we received notice that the Gibson well came back coliform positive, and all the other tests that we had done had come back clean. So on Sunday, we were expecting to lift the boil order on Sunday with a bunch of clean tests. But once Gibson came back coliform positive, that extended the boil order for another day. The state was not going to release it at that time. The Gibson well had been offline for the last few days, with the exception of a 9-minute period where we ran the well in order to get a test sample, and which is something we had to do in order to test the well. And so at that point, because we have to test it from the same place where we got the original sample, and so that was enough for the state to say, okay, even though it's been offline this whole time, the fact that you ran it for 9 minutes, we still need to extend this for 1 more day. So we did our next round of testing. By this time, Gibson well is completely offline. And then on Sunday, all the tests come back clean. With the Gibson well offline, then they allowed us to lift the boil order. So following that, we did a deep chlorination clean on the Gibson well. On what day? Was it Sunday? Sunday is when I misstated that we thought the source, when I say we, me, thought the source was the Gibson well, because everything came back clean except for coliform positive tests in the Gibson well. As Marty has explained to me, when we turn on the Gibson well, it takes water that's currently in the system and it kind of back flushes into the well to lubricate the bearings before they kick the well on, and then the water kicks back up this way. So our theory is we had E. coli in the system and it kind of kicked back this way into the well. And that's the reason why we were getting these coliform positive and E. coli positive tests in the well. So we've done the deep chlorination. I think the last 3 days we've had clean tests out of the Gibson well. We're hoping the state's going to let us bring this online here in the next day or two, because our determination is it's not the water source. It's not the spring or the water in the aquifer. That this was, the Gibson well was contaminated by water that was already in the system that had kind of backed up into the well. So that's a relief. If the aquifer's compromised, that's a whole different situation. We don't think that's the case. And so what is the source? It's undetermined. Our best theory is that we had construction going on in that area. Something got in there as they were hooking homes on, hooking in onto our main line. And then it got into a portion of our water system, which was a dead-end line that didn't have proper chlorine residuals, and the E. coli was able to survive. That's what triggered the test. That's what our prevailing thought is at this moment. So the solutions to that are to make sure that our chlorine residuals are higher within our system. For the most part of our system, they're fine. It was just in this particular part of town they were low. So part of that is we need to monitor that better, and then the second part is making sure that those residuals stay at a good level. Now, in order to bring the Gibson well back online, we have received approval to put a chlorinator on it, a short-term fix to put a chlorinator on there. Our long-term fix will be to build a chlorination system onto the Gibson well. So that's going to take a few months in order to engineer, design, and get that going. So our short-term fix is not something that we can do long-term as far as chlorination. It will get us through the next few months, but it's not a long-term solution. The state's going to require us to have that on our system in order to bring the Gibson well back online, even though the water right now has been testing clean the last few days. So that's what we're doing moving forward. On this handout I gave you, I have some FAQs that we'll probably need to answer. These were a lot of the questions that we got from our residents. I want to talk a little bit about what went right, the strengths of what happened, and part of this was our public communication was a strength. The first boil order, it was not a strength, but this time it was. Our Everbridge system was very effective. Using our utility account phone numbers to contact people we had some people that were getting 3 or 4 notifications, which is fine, which is better than getting 0 communications from us. But we also use social media. We also had people answering phones as people called and asked questions. Our internal communication, I thought, worked well. This time we were able to keep Marty isolated and fixing the problem. And then I would run point on the communication with the city council. And I'd give you guys updates. And I think one of the things that we did, I had a couple residents tell me, one thing I liked is you said you'll have an update for us tomorrow at 4 o'clock, and then you updated us at 4 o'clock. And so they knew what to expect as far as when the next update was coming. And that's kind of how we did it through the whole process, was because a lot of this was just contingent on getting more test results and kind of the interpretation of that and what that meant. And then we had, I got to mention Lisa and Sid taking care of answering a lot of questions online. When this went out at 5:30 on Wednesday, Lisa manned the city Facebook page for that evening, and I would call her every once in a while to just check in with her and see if there's any, and if she had any questions that were coming up that were not already being answered by information that I had given her, she would send me a text, and I only got 2 or 3 of those, and I think I got 2 or 3 from Sid, not a whole lot from Sid. And there were, roughly the same questions. A lot of people wonder, how long is this going to be? And how come you didn't notify us sooner? That was one of the big questions, is, how come we didn't know sooner once that first test hit? So we answered those questions. And then, our employees, when we are in a moment like this, they just step up and they show up. And that Wednesday night, I ended up leaving at 10:30. I know they were there till midnight. But sitting in pretty much the war room as people were out getting chlorination tests and relaying the information back to Marty. Marty, we have an intern, which we're going to recognize some of these people here coming up, but we have an intern that was, I think, there almost as much as Marty. I don't know if she slept in the office there, but we had an intern that was with us all the way.
Who was that? She's a PG girl.
Is she?
Yes.
McKenna.
Yes, she is. McKenna Kirby.
She was awesome.
Give that girl a job, Marty.
Because
We'll work on that.
she was able to take care of stuff that Marty just didn't have time to do. And she was, I don't know, I was just super impressed with how that was handled. So, we were not around the clock. The first 3 days is really intense, and there's a lot of moving parts and a lot going on. But once we kind of get things situated, now we're just waiting on test results. So we're not necessarily actively trying to solve the problem at that point. But those first 3 days were just 100% full go, and our employees responded. And then I've already mentioned what we can improve. We need to get additional chlorination in our system, which is what we're going to work on. And then we just need to make sure we're tracking those numbers well, because if that residual starts going down, that tells us there might be something in the water that could be problematic. So that's kind of the high level. I don't know, that was maybe mid-level. I probably got a little bit more mid-level than high level. But if you have questions, then fire away.
I just have one question. I know the states are going to require us to chlorinate the Gibson well, and I guess it's too bad, but it's probably
Yeah,
needed.
because it's a clean
right?
water
I mean,
source
it's- yeah,
otherwise.
it's- But it sounds like the problem this year and last year were really low residual chlorination levels in certain parts of our city.
Yep.
What are we doing specifically to address that? And what is the timeline on that one?
So right now, we're looking at Marty, do you want to, maybe you need to come up with this one. Our discussions are, okay, we probably need to be chlorinating all of our water sources at this point.
Even though it's not required by the state, we're just going to do it?
Correct.
Well, in the low, it's those areas, end of line, right? That it's kind of eating up all the chlorine, and then that's where we're testing, and that's where we're getting the positive results.
So Utah does not require a groundwater source to be chlorinated unless it's found to be low-quality water. So if you test that water and it comes back as a low-quality water source, then there could be testing, or there could be some form of chlorination required on a well, on a groundwater well. Very few cities have that in Utah. I don't know that it's not common throughout the United States, but in Utah it's not very common to have chlorination on a well. Now, when Scott says that we're looking at doing it on all of our wells, what we're more interested in doing, because our wells are pretty well protected. They're in very deep aquifers, water's coming from the mountains, and those are very good clean sources. And so as we started with this, we didn't feel that the well is the problem, because if the well water is the problem, then we've got problem in 3 or 4 other wells that are coming from the same aquifer, right? In the same levels.
Probably other cities too.
Yeah.
And other cities, we all take from those same aquifers. So we don't feel like it is that, but we also know that there was the potential for putting water into that well that could have came back. So the question, more or less, whether or not we need to do chlorination on the wells, what we need to do is get more chlorination into the system. And that will be by selecting a few locations that we can do that. And the Gibson well is now being required by the state that we put one on there. That will help us maintain more chlorine in that zone, and that'll be critical. And then as far as the question about last year, if you remember, one of our requirements from the state was to put on, it's called an online, I'm trying to remember the exact name of it anyways. We have to watch it, monitor it. It actually gives us automatic readings of what the chlorine residuals are coming out of the Monson system and down into the zone. And then we've been watching that one, and we've been doing very well. at keeping some higher chlorine residuals all the way out into the zone. Now, when you start talking about clear down by the boulevard, those things, then it's so far away from where we inject the chlorine that the residuals down there are hard to keep up without really over-chlorinating closer to the well. So we're, one of the other wells we're looking at drilling this year with the Boulevard well down in the Boulevard, we'll have a chlorination opportunity to get some chlorine into that zone. And so we're always conscientious of that, Todd, but we will pick a number of locations. The Gibson well will have chlorine on it. We got about 6 months to get that approved and actually constructed and operable. We have a temporary system on that will work just fine. It's already been approved. Well, hopefully in the morning I'm supposed to be getting a letter from them indicating that they're approving our temporary emergency chlorinator that will be on the well so that we can get that opened up and running. But that'll just help get chlorine into the zone.
That sounds good. Cool. Thanks, Marty.
Marty, I have a question. So explain how the houses get chosen to test and what you literally do to test. Like walk me through that process of how you test it at the house.
Sure. So we have a water system that is approved by the state. The state then requires us to choose sampling locations throughout the city. And so the 40 sample sites are somewhat random. Sometimes it's a little bit easier at one house or another, and then we have to get those approved by the state. And what the state's looking for is to verify that we've got a good sampling of the city, that it's not all located in one area or one zone. And so those are selected, and I don't know that we've changed any recently, so they just go on and on and on for years as far as the sampling site. It's tough sometimes to get new people, like to coordinate with somebody to come to their house to actually get the sample, and so those sampling sites are typically the same every month, but they are a good sampling of the entire city.
It's all over the city. And then what do you do when you go to the house?
When we go to the house, we typically will run the tap for
So you have to go inside their home, or no?
Typically, it's on the outside of their home.
Okay.
The hose bib, the hose bib.
A hose bib on the outside of their house. That's typically where the sample is taken.
Okay.
We have had issues in the past, and it's always a question of whether or not the home is compromised or the system's compromised. And that's why they have this process of, you get a bad sample, that doesn't necessarily mean that everything's compromised. It just means you may have got a bad sample, and that's why there's this other repeat sampling, and you go upstream and downstream to verify that it's a system issue and not a home issue. And we've had home issues before, and we've taken it out of one tap, and then we go around the house and take it out of the other tap, and one's clean and one's dirty. It's really interesting, and so the tap is where we typically will take the same sample every time. We are currently working on getting some actual sampling hydrants installed. There is a budget that we got approved last year for about $20,000. I think we'll probably get 5 or 6 sampling hydrants where you'll just see them, and there'll be a hydrant beside the road that we can actually get the samples out of rather than doing it at homes. And we're going to try to go towards that. That way there isn't a question of whether or not it's the home that's compromised or whether it's a system that's compromised. But it just takes a long time to get those set up. So.
And then this is a specific employee that does all of this testing from Public Works?
So there are a number that are trained to do that, but one is typically doing all of that for us every month.
Okay, and then he takes the water and sends it to where?
So he sends them to the testing lab, which is, right now, everything goes to Richard's lab, unless we've had an issue, and then we've branched out to Chemtech Ford because they can do some quicker sampling results for us.
Okay. And then would there be a time when you would mix up those, like annually or every couple of years, mix up the random samples of homes? Or not necessarily?
So again, these actually have to be approved by the state, and these are the ones that they've approved us to sample at. So it's not something that we want to go and just say, well, I'm going to go down the road and take another one down here. We can always do those in addition to, but the state wants to see them so they got the records and the history on the same home every time. And again, they're approving it to make sure it's throughout the entire system and a good sampling procedures or process.
So it's not necessarily where they are in the system or by a well. It really doesn't have anything to do with that. It's just completely random.
So again, I don't know that it's so much as a random. We just picked a number or a house number and I picked it up. We picked the houses based on their location in the zones to make sure we got a good sampling of the zone. So it wasn't, we wouldn't want two houses right next to each other or just two
Right.
blocks away. These are set throughout the zone. So we have 40 of them throughout the city, but that's how many the state required for our size of system.
And then when the employee takes that sample down to Richard's Labs, it's a 48 hours, or how quickly do they know if there's anything in the water?
Great, so there's a 24-hour initial test
Okay.
to tell whether or not there's coliform in the water. Coliform is an indicator of whether or not there may be other bacteria, and then at that point, they start an E. coli test to see if that bacteria is there. That takes another 24 hours.
Okay.
So, yeah, but the first round to know if there's anything there is a 24-hour test. And then by state standards, once you get the results of that 24-hour test back and it comes back coliform positive, then you go back to that exact house and you take that house and you do an upstream and a downstream house to make sure it's not just a house issue, it's a system issue if it's going to be more than one home. Then if they come back positive, which is coming back again 24 hours later, that's when we're required to notify residents and notify the state of the issue.
Okay.
I have an issue that I had a couple people ask me, why the 48 hours? And I tried to explain it as best I could, which is not very good. I think in the communication, if this ever happens again, a little sentence about why it takes 48 hours, that, you know, there's the Petri test, and it just, you can't speed it up, and that's what I tried to explain to these. I think that would be good in a communication, that it's gonna be 48 hours because, and then 2 lines or 3 lines, just kind of a summary, because that was the only question that I had from anybody was, why does it take 48 hours?
Yeah. That's a good question.
Marty, oh, go ahead.
Just a couple of points. I love our pure water, by the way. I've enjoyed our pure water for many, many years. I love the taste of it. Will chlorinating the water change, what will that do to the pureness of our water? That's number one. Okay, let's do that one first.
Okay.
Will the chlorination change the flavor of our water?
Typically, the chlorine residual that we try to run at is below a 1.
Okay.
Chlorine residual, that typically does not have a taste or odor to it.
Okay.
You can, once you start getting high chlorine residuals, now start to taste that or smell that, and that's not our goal, is to make it to that level, and we don't need to make a clean system. We try to run it in the 0.4 to 0.5 is our typical chlorine residual, which is in a range that you shouldn't notice a big difference in the taste.
Okay. Next question. I think the biggest questions I got were, am I in the zone? One resident mentioned that when we say Battle Creek, he's thinking the street as opposed to that zone. So on the interactive map, my question would be, can we get something where you enter your address and it literally says yes or no?
We had that.
Oh. I
They
didn't
just-
know you could enter the address.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of people Zooming, and if they're on a corner and they're not in the corner, it was just very confusing. I didn't know you could put in your address.
Yeah, there
Sorry.
was, I mean, we put some instruction on there, but there's a magnifying glass. You click on that, you punch in your address, it takes you right to the home on the map,
Okay,
and it showed whether you were in or not. That map had 60,000 views? 100,000 now? I mean, there were a ton of people using that map.
okay.
It was such a
Well
huge
done.
resource for us, but.
And then the Everbridge, do we have a percentage of how many residents in the zone that we actually?
Yeah, so we don't have that just yet. I mean, I know Kyler's run some preliminary numbers on that, but we'll have numbers for you to show this is how many sent out, this is how many responded. we can get all that data for you. We don't have that for you tonight, but
Okay.
that data is available to us.
And then my last thing is Kickstarter idea, 15-minute chloroform.
Somebody's got to figure out
If
the
we
way
can
to
do
speed up the science.
a rapid test of how to get that to show up, let's do
Probably
it.
do one, but just make sure it's consistent and not giving you bad
Yeah.
results. And I think
Oh,
that's
sounds
one
like
of
all
the
the
things they need
rapid
to make
tests.
sure that it is truly a bad result. So.
I'll wait though if you want.
Marty, I have another question. Can you explain in your own words? I feel like you're like on trial.
Go ahead.
But I don't know how
feel
else
like
to
In your own words.
what a cross connection is, because I've heard this from multiple people and I want to hear you say it. What is a cross connection?
Okay. So Pleasant Grove's history of how they used to service the community was with culinary water into the irrigation system. So a lot of homes would have typically it's a stop and waste valve that was tied directly to after the meter where it goes into the home. They'd have a T and something that went to their irrigation system. So at the end of the season, you turn off your stop and waste, and that makes it so you can drain your irrigation system. And the problem with the stop and waste is they can leak and they can push water back. And so when we went into the secondary water system, our directions where you need to make sure that is totally cut and capped. We can't have this connection back when you put in your new secondary system and you tie to your irrigation. You can't just have a stop and waste that's sitting there and actually have back pressure now from the secondary system on one side and the culinary from the other side, because if that leaks, then we can push water back through. So a cross connection would be a system that would have both systems connected together, and it may be isolated with a valve, but there's no guarantee that valve doesn't leak. And so it's very important. I mean, there is a whole program that we run with cross connection to make sure that we try to isolate and find out those that are. If you have that, and you don't know about this program, then you likely don't have a current approval to do that. You should let us know, and we can try to help you. There are active ways to do that. For example, clear up above the canal, we don't have any secondary water, but they still require what's called a reduced pressure zone valve to make sure when you blow out your irrigation at the end of the season or something, you're not blowing something back into the system. You have to have a reduced pressure zone valve on there. Those require a yearly inspection of those valves in order to have those connections. By state law, you're supposed to have those. So cross connection is just making sure that you have them totally isolated and you don't have a potential of something coming back into the culinary water system from your secondary water system.
But still, even if it does change a valve, doesn't that change the pressure? And that can also cause that backflow?
Sure.
Well, but only if it's connected. Only if it's connected to the primary culinary water. Typically, that's not the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the other problem, though, is that once they can get inspected, I mean, we have 10,000 homes. We can inspect that, but as soon as we leave,
Yeah, I think if we were inspecting it, we actually inspect the physical disconnect so that, and so yes, they could, they're out of the way, let's put it back together and jump out of the hole. That's one option, but probably not likely. I don't think we have a lot of people trained to do that. I think a lot of it's probably not that they're just not aware. They had somebody they hired to come and disconnect them, and they just left it and said, hey, just keep this valve off and it's fine. Maybe they weren't aware of a cross-connection potential. There are fail-safes in the system to try to do that. All of our meters have a dual check valve in them, so the setter, where the meter's at, also makes sure that you can't push water back. But as they get old, those also have a potential for leaking open. And so it's just a high risk to your system if you have a cross connection. We would really try to avoid those.
So this would be an older home, quite a bit older home, or not necessarily?
Yeah, an older home that
wanted to save a little bit they want to water in
you haven't had a
March instead of the first of May, and they want to be able to use culinary water to water. That would be a typical, hey, I want to do this because I want to be able to start watering and irrigating earlier than I have water available. and so they'll do that.
But most of the problem has been when they had culinary water watering their lawns, then we put in secondary water, and that cross connection wasn't severed. We haven't had any problems with people connecting to our secondary water, have we? And dropping in a stop and waste, connecting to the second
I
water.
don't know that we do, Todd.
I can't
mean, don't
imagine
think
someone
it's-
would do that. That just
again,
seems,
I can't imagine that it couldn't happen, but it would be really easy because we can't be everywhere at
Right.
once, right? And
but that's a lot of work.
so it is.
That's a lot of work. Someone would really have to be deviant to
If
do
they
that.
were disconnecting it, but one of the things is though, is that those are 4 foot deep, right? Those stop and wastes are
Yeah.
not up at the surface. So a
Right.
lot of people would actually disconnect them up at the surface rather than down at
Yeah.
the bottom. I mean, there's just a lot of work in doing that connection, so.
Well, thanks for your help, Marty. You were fabulous. Absolutely fabulous.
I have a
Okay,
question, Marty.
Councilman Jensen, we'll give you the floor.
You know, last year was hard for people not to have a source, right? And then this year, even more so, right? They want to hear, it's just human nature, they want to know what caused it, right? And then here we hear words of maybe, could have been, possibility, could have been building in the area. What kind of safeguards do we have put in place that when our people go out, or these contractors or builders, what are the safeguards that we talk to them about? Do we have someone that goes out and inspects this connection to our culinary water, or do we just leave it up to them and hope? I mean, because we have a lot of building that goes on in our city, right? And
Yeah, there's a whole process that goes on in order for somebody to come in to tie into our water mains. We require them to notify us. We don't allow them to touch our valves. They're not supposed to be turning valves unless we give them specific direction to do so. We typically will come and turn off valves so that they can make those connections. There are what are called hot tap valves. Essentially, they'll come in, and while the line is still hot and still live, they'll come in and drill that. They are protected to where they try to get the water out. That is a potential contamination source, but it's not likely. But our guys are there when they do that. Our guys are there, and we have to, before we'll allow anybody to turn those valves on and connect to the system and put water. Not that they couldn't accidentally do that, because there is a potential somebody turns a valve and does that. But the whole testing procedure, we make sure we have somebody there. They go through the 2-day process of validating that they've got the chlorine through there, everything's coming back clean before we'll allow them to turn the water into the system. So I think that there are good protections there for our system. We are heavily involved with that with our water department guys, and they are out there watching them and making sure everything's in place before we allow them to turn those things in. It's not to say that something can't sneak by, and I think I honestly feel that's probably the most likely thing that happened here. We've got a ton of construction happening in that area, and we have some lower chlorine residuals in that area, and therefore, if something got into the system, it could definitely cause a problem. So,
But what you're saying with the increased chlorine watch or just awareness, we should be able to possibly eliminate that if that was the cause in the future.
yeah.
Marty, and maybe this is not for you, is Everbridge, right? We talked about it in our retreat, about the capabilities that it does have, that we could use, on something like that we could utilize maybe when it sends these texts out to people, maybe it has that and more information included with the link and interactive stuff that's included with it.
Yeah.
I mean, the school district, they don't use Everbridge, right? But they have something similar that they send out, and it's pretty impressive.
No, so we've talked with Lindsay and the county guy that helps oversee Everbridge on the county level to help us use that as a resource now to just push information as opposed to emergency situations, similar to what we talked about in the retreat. So, I mean, that's still in process. I know Lindsay's working with that guy, and we just haven't been able to get to the point of saying, okay, we have that exactly figured out. We have added Kyler to the system. Kyler used Everbridge in the city he was in previous. He has a pretty good working knowledge of it. So he's now an administrator on the system to help us use that more robustly than what we've been using it before. So instead of a emergency situation, just something's happening, your utility, well, our utility billing has a separate texting thing where if you're overdue on your payments, then Scott Wells has an ability to send a text specifically to those people to let them know. But we want to use Everbridge in that same way.
But I
We
think
have this
Scott-
tool, it's just huge, right? It has all these capabilities,
Uh-huh.
but I just say we use
Yeah.
it.
But Scott, not just to increase what we send the notifications out for, but what we can do within the notification, I think was what Eric's saying, that it's, can we send a link, because we're limited on the information, is there more capabilities within the system that maybe we're not aware of, where we can send a link to a map or a website, or so we're not so limited?
Well, that's what we did. So the Everbridge text came up. I mean, I got mine, and then you reply to it, and then it gave me the link to our city website.
Yeah. That's
So
what I'm
it
saying.
does have that capability. if that's
There's
what
just
you're
more
asking.
you can add to that
Yeah,
text, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Sorry, say
too.
that again?
There's just more information you could add to the text, with not only the interactive map link, I mean, there's more.
Kyler, is there a character limit that we have as we send that out?
There are some character limits with Everbridge. And so we did send the link. I think the website was sent in the link and the map was also linked in the original Everbridge. So I guess I don't know beyond that what the question is.
Okay, yeah, talk with us about what you mean.
Any other questions for Marty or Scott?
The crazy thing was also for that same area, portions of it, within that first night, we also had a power outage. So we had a huge lightning storm. There was just some fun, crazy things going on. I bet did we have a fire, chief, at the same time? Yeah.
So I have another question, Scott. Because it only took us about 5.5 hours, 6 hours this time to turn around and get information to the public, but the previous boil order took longer. So is there going to be a time when, let's say we don't have the information back or it's taking longer, that we just put out something to the public? Like, is there kind of a breaking point where we just have to release information? Because if we're going on like 8, 9 hours and we haven't heard from the state, or it's a holiday weekend like it was before, no one's available, this happens like Friday afternoon and now we're waiting until Monday, like, at what point would we release information to the public if it's taking quite a bit longer than expected?
Well, so again, we have a 24-hour window to do this.
I know, but
And I understand, people want to know right away, as soon as possible. We want them to know right away. But one of the biggest takeaways from me is if we were not prepared when we released that to answer questions, it would have been chaos. And so if we ever say we have an E. coli positive test and we're not ready to answer questions as a city, it's going to be a disaster. So again, holiday weekend, that was probably part of the reason why things took a little bit longer then. But, I mean, we'll do our best to get everybody in place as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, because this is the second time, we did learn lessons from the first time that made this a lot quicker process. But it does take time to mobilize, to get information, to make sure, because we got to get it correct information too. That's the other thing. If we're not putting out correct information, that's going to cause chaos. And so this is the Wednesday afternoon. There's not a way to describe this other than, Marty's trying to figure this out. Tina and I are huddling on the informational part because we're starting to craft this. Meanwhile, we're trying to get our social media ready. We got Kyler working on the map. We have all these moving parts. Everybody's dedicated to this, but it does take time for us to get everything ready. Because once we hit the go button at 5:30, it blew up. And we handled it awesomely. We were prepared, we were ready. Interactive map, I think, 25,000 views within the first hour, half hour, I don't know. That thing went nuts. We had people on the phones. We needed people on the phones because even though people looked it up and saw that they were in or out, they would still call and verify with us, which I understand. I'd probably do the same thing. But we have to have somebody on the phone. And so that's my best answer, Sid. We are going to move as quickly as we possibly can. But for us to say, hey, we have an E. coli positive test, more details to come later, that could be a problem, so.
Well, then you add to it, you got the mayor breathing down your back. I wasn't saying anything, but I was breathing down everybody's back. So, but anyway.
No, we were moving.
I just want
We
to
were moving.
say that this process compared to the last time and the headaches I had were greatly relieved because of the way Scott was able to take that point, work with you, and keep me a little, being able to work with the guys and direct them a little bit on where we needed to go to test things out and try to get things moving. So we've learned something. I'm not sure that it applies to everything that we'll ever experience, but we've learned something about that I think was very helpful for me as a director to be able to kind of just stay a little bit more removed. I didn't mind at all that we set up the Zoom meeting, and happy to do that and give you any information I have. But it was really helpful for things to go through Scott rather than for me trying to send things out while I'm trying to, it just gets so distracting when you're trying to really focus on what the problem is and trying to get to an end. So anyways, that was very helpful. But thank you also for your support during this. That was very evident as well, so.
Okay, thank you, Marty and Scott and Tina. You did a great job, and we hope we're done. But we never know. We thought we were last year, but anyway, so we'll just go by and you just wait till the next test samples come in.
Thank you, Tina.
Yeah, chlorination will help,
Yeah.
so I'm
Get the
glad we're moving in
residuals
that
out.
direction.
But then you can, those who don't have I can taste the chlorine in my water.
I can too. Yeah, I can too. But it's nothing like Phoenix.
So I feel good about that.
Nothing like Phoenix, so
No.
we're
Feel
still
good
okay.
about that. So it's, hey, it's not canal water, okay?
Exactly.
It's half chlorine.
With that, we still have some minutes. Scott, you want to start, we'll go over our agenda?
Yeah, if it's all right, I think let's go through our department reports,
Okay,
Mayor.
that'll-
Let's see
that'll
if we
work.
can get those taken care
So,
of.
with that, we will give any of the department heads the opportunity, if you have anything to bring to the council. Don't all rush the podium at once, but anyone like to come forward? Okay, okay. Thanks, Dion, for being the first.
How about now? So just an update on Vista Trails. We met with the trail builder today. He's going to crunch some numbers. Hopefully they'll be in later this fall, around October. Let them know that we did receive the grant from Utah County, the $20,000 grant. So they need to have some construction done prior to March 1st. So it will be a late fall, possibly a combination late fall, early spring, or an early spring build. So anyway, we walked the trail. He's excited. He says it's going to be an amazing project. And so things are moving forward that way.
Okay, thanks, Dion.
Yep.
Next.
I was just going to give you a quick update. Tanner Edwards' last day was Thursday, so Tanner Edwards. So we did some testing. Kyler helped us out. I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday. Interviewed 12 really, really good applicants, probably the best group of interviews we've had in a long time. A couple of them had some experience, so we have a couple of good applicants to go off of. So we'll move that process forward as quickly as possible and hopefully fill that position real quick. It was a busy weekend, had an aggravated assault, a couple of assaults. Eric actually texted me on a good one. There was a big group up at the high school, a strange assault. It was,
Well, you explain it.
well, it was two high school kids that were fighting over Facebook, and so their fathers just said, let's get this over with, and they made him go up to the high school and duke it out. It was kind of strange. Yeah, and then the fathers refused to give any information when we got up there, so the fathers ended up going to jail. It was quite strange, but a lot of DUIs. It was a busy weekend for us, so we're moving along, but things are good.
Okay, thanks, Chief.
Quick reminder, Heritage Festival is on Monday, and our Harry Potter party is a week from Saturday.
Okay. Well, this is always good news when Daniel wants to, yeah.
I just click send button, so I send you an email with the newest rap sheet. We're doing interviews maybe by the end of this week or beginning of the next one, right? To get 2 new employees for my department. We have an idea of getting someone that's going to help us track applications all the way from submittal till end. It's going to be, I think it's going to help us a lot to know exactly where things are, how things are moving along. Yeah, that's what I have.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. Did
Thank you.
anybody make it to Dutch Boys?
No.
You did? I mean, you didn't go, they asked, they sent out.
On Wednesday. Yeah, I was out of town.
I got it too late.
It's not purple, it's blue. It looks purple though, but it's a blue building.
Okay.
We can only handle one purple building.
I've been to Dutch Brothers 3 times already. It's everything so far. I've kind of mixture of chocolate milks and yeah.
Which coffee? Which coffee?
I'll get with you, Sid, and what we've tried. Our family's tried a plethora of things, and we've enjoyed it. So, just a quick email I got, and just wanted to. She says, my daughter just finished swim lessons in preschool 1 with Leslie and Teddy, and I just wanted you to know how awesome they both were with the class and with my daughter. We drove 30 minutes each day to get to swim lessons, and it was absolutely worth it to have them as her instructors. Thanks so much to both of them for making swim lessons so fun and to help her get more comfortable in the water. And just wanted pool closed yesterday. Brett's and his staff over there had a great year. They and the long days to all the way to get to Labor Day. Summer kind of ends when school starts for a lot of people, but there's still the pool that goes till Labor Day. And Brett's staff just kind of dwindles, and it's just kind of down to Brett and a few lifeguards just trying to get it to the end of the season. And so major kudos to the swim lessons team, the swim staff, and Brett. There were some long days, and he put a lot into it this year, and so I just want to thank him for that. And thank some awesome swim teachers. All of our swim teachers do a good job, but it was good to get that. So thanks, guys.
Hey, thank you. Okay, Chief, I'm glad you're coming forward because we've got a lot of questions on this new fire truck that was on the back of a flatbed.
Yeah, it wasn't a fire truck.
Well, the ambulance isn't too far away.
You look. It's okay.
It was Wyoming.
Chief, this is educational time for someone, so go ahead.
You know,
It
Mr.
was
Darrington's
pretty
from
good.
Wyoming.
I got this random picture. I was out for the weekend. All of a sudden I get this picture. Who got a picture of the ambulance? And it's like Cheyenne, Wyoming. So that was good to see because we hadn't seen a picture of it. That was good. So I sent up to people I know, and they asked, where did you get that picture? I said, I know people. So I had to do the same thing. I couldn't tell where I got it from, but.
So when do you think we'll get when will it be delivered?
That ambulance, hopefully, we get to go drop some stuff off tomorrow. Got to drop the radio off and a couple things off to them that they need to install up in Salt Lake. So I'm guessing a couple of weeks is what my hope is. I've been saying a couple weeks for a while because they keep telling me a couple of weeks. So, but at least I know it's here in the state and it's close by.
So when you get it, send an invite out. We'll bring
we will.
we'll bring the donuts, okay?
No, yeah, we'll definitely let you know when you get it. We'll give you a heads up. So hopefully it won't be too long. Just real quick, I thought I'd just kind of tell you, we've been real busy too. This past, I don't know, it's kind of weird these last few months. Since June, our average, we had 160 calls in June, 180 calls in July, had 169 calls this last month. This last month, we had American Fork come to our city 39 times this last month. We lost probably, I don't want to say lose, but they took anywhere from 6 to 11 transports that we weren't able to get. That's not all their fault. We've had issues with some of our apparatus, so our staff has been a little strange this past month with getting stuff fixed and going. Hopefully we'll get that taken care of in the next little bit as we get all of our rigs back and running properly in order and all that fun stuff. But we're just getting busy. And the guys are going. The guys have been covering a lot of shifts. You know, see, we lost a handful of our good part-time paramedics. We can't get a medic for the life of us. I mean, paramedics are really hard to come by. We've hired a few extra advanced EMTs that are doing real well, but we're still looking for medics, so we've had to have a lot of our own guys come back and cover those shifts to make sure we've got medics on our rigs. So they've been doing a great job covering those shifts and making sure we've got, you know, the proper people where they need to go. But yeah, like I say, it's just been real busy. You know, it's just, I don't know what it is. It's kind of strange. If it keeps this average up, we could be over 2,000 calls, you know, by the end of the year, you know, calendar year. So keeps going up. So I don't know what it is.
Okay.
But we're doing good.
Well, it's just called growth, and
I know, yeah.
and people want to do things to themselves sometimes.
That's true,
so.
yeah, so.
Okay, thanks,
Thanks.
Chief. I think that's everybody but Marty, but we'll give Marty some time later on, so anyway, if we don't have anything else for the council right now, we will, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn from our work session and reconvene here at 6 o'clock.
So moved.
Have a motion, do I have a second? Second. Have a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?